Summer 2025 was a record breaker. It was the warmest on record for the UK, but sometimes the headlines don't tell the whole story. So I want to delve into the details to find out just how exceptional summer 2025 was. Now, to do this, I'm joined by Head of Climate Attribution, Dr Mark Mccarthy. Now, Mark, it has been quite a summer. I'm sure you've been very busy.
Yes, records have fallen this summer, a really extreme season overall when we look at the statistics in the context of our historical climate records.
So let's delve into it now then. So we've got a variety of charts that we're going to go through the next 10 minutes or so, but starting off, and let's get to the main headline really. So looking at mean temperature, and this map, what does it show us?
So this is showing that essentially everywhere across the UK was warmer than average for the summer, and in the darkest red areas that's showing sort of regions of the UK where the temperatures were more than 2 degrees above a normal summer that we would expect, and this widespread red area is more than 1.5 degrees above the average for a UK summer. So really the notable thing here is how widespread the warmth was over the whole of the UK this year, and not confined to sort of an isolated heat wave in a particular location.
Yeah, it's large chunks of the country, even in this like scarlet red, and then even parts of Scotland, eastern Scotland, and yeah, everywhere had an above average summer when we look at mean temperature. But lots of people pointing out that we've had warm summers before. 1976 stands out as an example. Let's draw a comparison then. The same chart now, but this time for summer 1976, and there are some quite stark differences.
Yeah, so absolutely. So here we can see when we compare for 1976, that sort of scarlet red is less widespread, so we're sort of covering less of the country. So overall, that heat wave in terms of the mean temperature was less severe than this year.
Which is quite interesting because people often remember 1976. Worth pointing out at this moment that we're looking at mean temperature.
Yes.
So that's the temperature through the whole day for the whole season. If we looked at minimum temperature, actually 2025 was even greater than average, even greater than the previous record. But if we looked at maximum temperature, 2025 wasn't the record breaker, was it?
No, so in terms of the daily maximum temperature, so averaging the peak temperature of every day through the whole season.
Across the whole country.
Across the whole country, then for that metric, then 1976 actually does still hold the title as the hottest summer. But when we look at the piece overall, so accounting for both the daytime peaks in temperature, but also those nighttime minimums, which are really important for how comfortable people can feel in the warmer weather, then that's where 2025 is the outstanding record breaker.
Yeah, we'll come on to in a second why there's that discrepancy, that difference. Then the other one that I wanted to look at was the previous record. So that was 2018, and here we have it here, the same chart. Now, if I just get 2025 back up, you can see just how much warmer than average. Worth bearing in mind, the average that we're comparing is the 1991 to 2020 average. But you can see just how much warmer 2025 was compared to 2018. And so, you know, we've broken the record.
Yes.
By some.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
It's not a small margin, is it?
It wasn't. So sometimes these records can fall by really narrow margins, which is what happened when 2018 broke the record at that time. But this year the margin is much larger. I mean, it doesn't sound a huge amount. We're still talking in terms of tenths of degrees, but in terms of the records and for averages over a whole summer, that's quite a significant change, and that's sort of really visualised in these maps.
And so why did we break it by so much? Like what do you think was the main driving force?
Well, there are a number of significant factors behind UK summer heat waves. So in particular, having the right atmospheric circulation, so getting the right weather patterns that are conducive to those extended periods of clear skies, dry weather. It can also be driven by the dryness of the soils and the ground. So we've had an extended period of dry weather this year, leading into sort of dry soils and dry conditions even as the summer started. So that can boost the temperatures that we experience. The temperature of the oceans around the UK, so our coastal waters, when they're elevated, that can boost the temperatures through the summer. And then on top of all of those factors that sort of create heat waves and create a warmer than average summer, we also have the fact that our climate is changing. Greenhouse gas concentrations are rising and our climate is getting warmer. So that is also contributing to an increased chance of breaking these records sort of in successive years.
So there's an increasing chance of us breaking it again as we go further ahead.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, another chart that I found really fascinating was this one. So this looks at previous years from 1884 up to 2024, looking at individual counties when they recorded their warmest summer on record. And it's quite varied. I mean, admittedly, down the eastern side, many places were 2022, a few places were 2023, but there's quite a variety, even a couple of 1899s across parts of Northern Ireland and South Wales. But if we now compare the most up-to-date version of this chart, including 2025, and, well, pretty much not everywhere, but the vast majority of counties set their record, which goes in line with what you were saying before about just how widespread the warmth was in 2025. Most places, most counties had their hottest summer on record. And I just find this quite remarkable to go from such a mismatch or mixture to,
absolutely, because, and as you can see before, there were some previous summers where, like 2022, the extreme warmth was very much focused down the eastern coast, and that's where some of the most extreme temperatures in the 40 degrees, for example, in the eastern side of the country were experienced. And contrast that to other summers, so 2003 particularly notable for Scotland, and 1995 still a significant heatwave event for lots of the western areas of the UK.
It's also interesting, 2018, which we just discussed, was the previous record. Yeah, some places, I mean, Devon, Cornwall here, for example, but some places it was the warmest record for those individual counties, but not most, by any means. So that is kind of surprising, really, when you think the UK as a whole, it was the warmest on record up until 2025, but it just wasn't as widespread as 2025.
Well, 2018 was quite widespread at the time and replaced by 2022.
Of course,
as the warm year in some areas.
Places. Yeah, I get you. Now, you've been working hard on an attribution study, I'm right to say, I think, and looking at how our climate is changing and how unusual 2025 is, or perhaps isn't, really, as things are changing. So do you want to tell us through, or take us through this graph?
Yeah, absolutely. So what's been shown here, this black trace, is the summer average temperature, averaged across the UK, going back to 1884, based on the observational, so the measured data, through to 2025. So this final point here, which is the highest average temperature, is for the 2025, the summer we have just experienced. And this sort of shows that year-to-year variation we get in our climate in the UK with a number of notable sort of hot summers. This standout peak here is 1976. And contrast that to collections of periods where we had very inclement or cold summers, particularly back in the 1960s, or going back much earlier into the sort of early 20th century and the late 19th century. And so what this curve is also showing is, despite this variability in our summer climate, there is an increasing trend that we're seeing underneath that. And so on average, our summers are getting warmer. The shaded areas behind that are estimates that have come from a large international collection of climate models that are simulating the climate of the world, and so we can extract from those the representations of UK summer climate. And what the bands are showing is sort of the range that those models predict as being sort of the typical range for UK summers. And this is a range representing sort of the 90% of summers. So we expect reality to pop outside of that sometimes, which is what we're seeing. Yeah, absolutely. And there are a couple of colours here representing different experiments with these climate models. And the red curve is the one that is representing what we believe to be the actual historical forcings on our climate. So this includes changes due to natural events, so volcanic activity, changes in solar activity, but also changes in greenhouse gas concentrations due to human activity and human emissions. And this solid red line is sort of marking the average of that. So that's sort of highlighting the long-term trend, so highlighting this sort of increase that we expect to see.
So is that why it goes down a little bit around the 60s?
And yet we do see a dip here, and that's likely associated with other types of pollutions and aerosol pollutions in the atmosphere during that period.
Okay.
We can contrast that with the green region, which the same climate models, but this time run in a natural scenario. So they include the volcanoes, they include the solar activity, but crucially don't include human emissions of greenhouse gases. So the greenhouse gases remain at a equivalent pre-industrial level. And so that still represents, particularly going back into the 19th and early 20th century, there's heavy overlap between that and the red historical forcings. But the two scenarios sort of start to diverge from the mid to late 20th century. And so this is sort of representing the best estimates of the human-induced climate change component on UK summers. And the purple region is then extending that into future scenarios. So what we project may be plausible outcomes into the future. In this case, based on a sort of a mid-scenario emission scenario. So we can sort of infer a few things from this. One thing, by examining the data in this way, combining the observations and the climate model, we can see that due to this trend, we can say that human activity and those human emissions have likely increased the chance of a 2025 summer about 70 times. So it's about 70 times more likely to occur due to human emissions of greenhouse gases. And actually an event as significant as this year would be extremely unlikely in a natural climate. Not impossible, but we're talking sort of 1 in every 300 plus years type event, so very rare. So that's really important to sort of recognise that climate change is affecting our climate now and contributing to these records that we're seeing. But you can also place this into the context of other sort of major historical events. So one thing you can pick out, 2025 is a record-breaking extreme. We haven't seen a summer as warm as this on average in the past. But our estimates suggest that actually in our current climate, this might be something like a 1 in 5 year event. So not necessarily extreme for our near future climate. So
it's exceptional at the moment, I guess, but in the near future, it's not going to be that uncommon.
But yes, and plausibly we could experience hotter summers still. And as an example, we could take 1976, which for its time and the time that it occurred was an exceptional extreme. So if we sort of transpose 1976 into our current warmer climate, it would be a much more severe event. So maybe even close to a degree warmer than what we've recorded in 2025. Is that alarming? Yeah, I would say that that's a real sort of warning bell that while we are experiencing these extremes, we need to recognise that there are associated risks of perhaps worse extremes further down the line and in the near future.
I think another thing that this chart highlights, which is a big talking point recently, is 1976 was exceptional. It really stood out. There were some really cooler, markedly cooler summers nearby. The preceding years had all been way, way cooler. Whereas if you look at 2025 compared to the recent years, yes, obviously last summer wasn't anywhere near as warm, but we've had warmer, or very warm, similarly warm summers in the last like 10, 20 years or so. And so perhaps that's why this summer doesn't stand out so much in people's minds, because we've kind of got used to it, I guess. Do you think that's true?
That's certainly a possibility, and one thing we need to be mindful of in a changing climate is that our climate here in the UK, it is changing quite rapidly, and while our perceptions of climate and how that's changing may respond to clusters of warm events, we still need to be aware of how we're adapting to this changing climate. So, buildings that have a very long lifespan, for example, and making sure that they're comfortable for people, and how we design the spaces that we live in and work in to ensure that we enable us collectively to stay safe in the sorts of extremes that we can start to experience now and that we might be experiencing in the very near future.
Yeah, lots of buildings designed to keep heat in, but maybe we need to keep things cooler. Now, we already touched on this earlier when we were looking at why 2025 summer was so warm, and you mentioned sea surface temperatures. So here's a map looking at sea surface temperatures currently, on the 31st of August, so pretty recently around the UK, and showing how strong they are in terms of a heatwave category. And lots of places are in the heatwave category, and that's been the case through much of this summer, that's right?
Yeah, absolutely. So particularly around the English Channel, Irish Sea, and the sort of southern half of the North Sea have been in a sort of marine heatwave category for pretty much the whole summer period. So we're sort of talking around a degree above average for those regions, and other seas sort of coming in and out of marine heat waves over the course of the summer. So having these sort of elevated sea temperatures around our coastal zone can really help sort of increase and maintain the high temperatures through the course of the season, as we have found this year. And that may not always sort of be peaks in summer heat where you particularly feel the heat of the sun, but helping to maintain those temperatures through the night time and even through the periods when we had some short periods of more inclement weather during the season, and the oceans really sort of helping to maintain that warmth, so that we see this persistent warmth right through the whole season, which is contributing to those record conditions.
So that's why, part of the reason why our minimum temperatures were so far above the previous record, and mean temperatures too, even though the maximum temperatures weren't higher than 1976. Now this chart shows our average sea surface temperatures across the UK for each year, for the first 7 months of the year, from each year since 1980. And you can see two things. One, this general rise in sea surface temperatures going in line with a warming climate, and also the fact that 2025 was well above previous years, not too far off the year before last, but still, you compare it to 20 odd years ago, it's almost 2 degrees higher, in fact more than 2 degrees higher, and so that just shows how warm the seas around the UK have been so far this year.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. It's been that sort of accumulated warmth in our oceans throughout the year, and not just this year, but also looking back at the last 5 years of warmth sort of throughout that half-year period is quite exceptional.
And then another chart that shows something similar, but this time looking at daily averages, again across the UK for every year since 1980. And the red line highlighting 2025. And you can see throughout the year, it's been on the top end compared to previous years. And each grey line just representing one of the previous years. But actually, at times it's been the warmest for each individual day. But actually it currently isn't, not quite. And there are times earlier on in the summer where we've had quite markedly warmer days during June and July. But it's just consistently been either the warmest for that day or very near. And so again, it's no surprise that we've had these warm seas and then that's had a knock-on effect on the land temperatures as well. Yeah,
absolutely. We're as an island nation, we are very much affected by what's going on in the ocean on our doorstep. And so monitoring the marine temperatures and the occurrence of marine heat waves is a really sort of active area of our weather and climate monitoring activities.
Yeah, definitely something to keep on top of, especially because of the impacts not only to the heat in the UK, but also marine wildlife, which is incredibly vital. Then it's not just temperature that we need to look at, though, when looking back at a season. This chart looks at summer 2025 sunshine levels in comparison to average. And for many, not everywhere, but for many places, it was markedly sunny. And it wasn't the sunniest on record, though, was it?
No, not by a reasonable margin, actually. But it is worth noting that our climate, a hot summer, will tend to have a large amount of these sort of high pressure systems dominating with clear skies and dry conditions. So it is not surprising that it is significantly above average. So all these yellow regions on the map here, but not in this case a record breaker for sunshine amount.
And I think you said something before that was quite interesting to me, that it's in the years with the most amount of sunshine during the earlier summer months where we get the sunniest summers on record, because obviously they have the longer days around the summer solstice. And so whilst we have had, to be honest, through much of the summer, we've had lots of fine sunny weather, but if that really peaks during the early summer months, then that would really skew this average quite markedly. Hence why I think 1976 is still the record, because it was June, July in 1976 where it was particularly warm. The other thing then, a big talking point through this year, and a big negative point really from most people's point of view, is how dry it's been. And I wanted to get this chart up just to cover a few things with you. So this, if you've not seen it before, this chart looks at this year so far, and it compares the 2025 to both the average and previous record years in terms of rainfall. And the shaded brown area just shows how much below average we have had our rainfall amounts so far this year. And it was really during spring. So, I mean, the beginning of the year, the late winter months, they were slightly drier than average, but it was really spring where we really didn't get much rain at all. And we came so markedly below average. And then even though June and July, rainfall-wise, weren't that remarkable, they were, which actually surprised me when I looked into it, because I remember them as being really dry, but they didn't really stand out. They were quite near average, and you can see the line runs parallel almost to the average line. But then we had some very dry weather during August. Yes, towards the end of August we had some wetter weather, but through large chunks of August it was very dry indeed. So actually the issue with the dry weather has been exacerbated later on. And sorry, I'm just rattling on, but this is important because yes, we do have some wetter weather now. We're going to have some wetter weather as we head further into September, but we're quite a long way short of making amends, if you will, for just how dry spring was and how dry chunks of summer were. Our reservoirs, our river levels, they're very low. We need a substantial amount more rain to come through the autumn, through the beginning part of winter, in order to reduce the potential for some long-term issues with regards to this. Sorry, I've talked away at you. Is there anything you'd like to highlight on this chart?
No, I think that's the key point, that setting the scene for this summer was the fact that it had been so notably dry for the early part of the year. Again, not record-breaking, but that is what can cause problems, particularly in sectors like agriculture, where you're already set up and your soils are drier than they might otherwise be in a typical year, and then you have to contend on top of that with, although not exceptional, but still dry summers. And while we talked about the summer wasn't exceptional either way in rainfall, but that also marks some regional variability in where that rain fell when it did affect us. So this map is showing the difference from average for the summer rainfall this year. So the brown areas are drier than average, and the darkest browns being those areas that were most notably dry.
Some places are below 30%, is that right?
Yeah, below 30% of the average rainfall for the summer. So some notable dry regions across the Midlands of England in particular. But we can contrast that with the blue areas are those parts of the country where there's actually recorded more rainfall than average for the summer. So particularly parts of Western Scotland and also notably Cumbria. So there, with rainfall statistics, we also always have to sort of consider the significance of those regional patterns. And so where the summer dry had most impact may have been in some of those areas where there was a real deficit of rainfall right through the summer season as well.
And the dry weather through spring, through summer, that helped contribute to the hot spells that we had as well, didn't it? Because a dry land is going to heat up quicker. So we had warm seas, dry land, several spells of high pressure, perfect ingredients to see temperatures so high. And so they, whilst even if we hadn't had the dry weather before it and the seas weren't quite so warm, we would have still had the hot spells with high pressure. They were hotter than they otherwise would have been. And then when you add in the baseline climate heating that we have, it's no wonder when you look back that it was an exceptionally warm, a record-breaking summer. All
of the components were there and come together to create those record events.
Thank you so much for talking to me today, Mark. It's been a pleasure as always. It's been really interesting looking back at how exceptional 2025 was. I do hope you've enjoyed this talk. There's a blog, there's a news release, there's more information on our website about summer 2025, so do check that out. We will, of course, be constantly updating our forecasts, our deep dives, our 10-day trends. They're going to continue as we go through autumn and we have more autumnal weather on the way. Anyway, thanks very much for watching. I'll see you again soon.